Hello, what's up everyone? My name is Tanner Babcock. I'm going to be talking a little bit today about all of the different Linux distros I've used over the years. This list of distributions are only distros that I've used on real computers, not just distros I've worked with on virtual machines. Here's my custom thumbnail for the video for all the different distros logos. So, when I first got into Linux a long time ago, it would have been about 2010, maybe 2011, the very first GNU Linux distribution I used in my life was Ubuntu 10.10. I think it was called Marvelous Meerkat or something. Back in those days, Linux was so different in those days. There was no Steam, there were no video games, there were no snaps or Flatpak or app images. There was Wine, and all we had to work with was the Linux kernel 4, early version. Ubuntu 10.10 came with GNOME 2, which looked really nice, but the Ubuntu releases after that, like 11 and 12, came with GNOME 3 and Unity. And I remember, not really liking those desktop environments. I remember liking GNOME 2 the best. So, back in those days, Ubuntu would have looked like this. Yep, that's GNOME 2. Notice you have two bars. You have the top bar, and then you have the bottom bar, which is like your task manager. You have these nice window decorations. You have this nice black and orange GTK theme that it comes with by default. And I just remember thinking it was so smooth, so easy to use. It was great for a beginner who is transitioning from Windows, who wants to use Linux. Ubuntu was great for that. It was probably, king of the distros back then. Ubuntu was there wasn't any of this other stuff. There wasn't Manjaro. Arch Linux wasn't as big of a thing. Linux Mint wasn't a thing back then. It was just Ubuntu. Ubuntu was the go-to standard for new Linux users. Now, I started using these Unix shell commands, like you see me typing in every video. I started learning those when I was about 13 on my dad's Mac. When I first got into programming, I worked with AppleScript and C. I wanted to know how to write C so I could write programs for my PSP. Back then, Ubuntu still had the Synaptic package manager. It is based on Debian, so it uses the apt package manager. Back in those days, when you wanted to install Linux, you had to burn a CD. A CD or a DVD that was the live image. And then we used those because back in those days, laptops still came with CD trays. And you could open these CD trays and put in the Ubuntu CD or Arch CD, and your laptop could boot from the CD, and that was how you installed it back then. So, after having fun on Ubuntu, I knew I really wanted to install Arch because I just thought Arch was so cool and all the cool people run Arch and Arch is so interesting and hard. I want to really get into Linux, really sink my teeth into Linux. So it seemed to me in my 15-year-old brain that the next step was to install Arch. So that's what I did. I didn't use it for very long. I remember using it for 4, 5, no more than 6 months. I broke my system pretty quick. It wasn't responding to updates very well. I remember using it to play Minecraft, the Java version of Minecraft, and I had a little Minecraft wallpaper to go with it. I was trying to get away from the desktop environments, and I wanted to get into window managers. So I installed the awesome window manager, which is just so old. It's one of the oldest window managers out there. But I used it, and I remember it being so hard to configure. I'll always remember awesome is just, you need so much patience to work with it and to get the widgets to work exactly the way you want them to, and to get your menu, your context menu to work. I mean, it was kind of scary. I was really diving in. Linux was scary. Moving to Arch from Ubuntu, it forced me to have to learn a lot of stuff. Have to learn a lot of stuff about the internet, about Linux. That was when I first learned how to connect to the Wi-Fi using only the command line. Because if you install Arch, you're going to have to learn how to do that. If you want to install new packages, you need the internet to install those new packages. And Arch doesn't come with, any desktop environment, any graphical applications. So if you're a new Linux user, you're kind of getting thrown in the deep end there. But I remember I came up swimming, despite having to adapt to Arch. Some other challenges were getting Pulse audio working. I remember I just couldn't get sound from my Arch Linux installation for the longest time. I wanted to listen to my Neutral Milk Hotel and Godspeed You Black Emperor on my mom's laptop. But I remember I finally figured it out. I used to use a terminal called URXVT. And I also learned how to use NCMP CPP with MPD. And I still use that as my music player to this day. But yeah, see, I have problems with Arch. To me, Arch just seems like this wobbly Jenga tower of a Linux distro, and every time you want to change something or you want to update, it's like you're removing another block from the wobbling Jenga tower. And I see, Arch users making forum posts like, oops, I broke my thing, I ran an update and now nothing works, and now my audio doesn't work, or now my display manager doesn't work, and I don't know what to do now, can you please help me? Stuff like that doesn't really happen on other distros. It's just so easy to break shit on Arch. It's not fun. I feel like a lot of Arch users spend a lot of time kind of cleaning up after the Pac-Man updates, trying to fix stuff that has broken, trying to mend things that Pac-Man has tampered with to make the system or certain applications, unusable. It's just kind of weird, Like, are they masochists? Do they like all of this suffering? Do Arch users love just panicking and freaking out about their broken system? Do they think Arch is just like so sophisticated and so intelligent, and they must not be smart enough to totally use Arch or adapt to Arch, that they gotta, get better at Linux and, so you can have better Arch skills, so you can, be a better Arch Linux user. But it's like, why? It's trouble. It's just all trouble. I think I went back to Ubuntu after using Arch for 4 or 5 months when I was a teenager. And then I bought my own laptop for a while, and I kind of took a break from Linux. I just didn't care about computer stuff at that time in my life. I wanted to be an artist. I cared about music and film and painting and drawing and stuff. I had a new laptop with Windows 8 on it. And I remember using that Windows 8 for a long time. I bought that laptop in, I want to say, 2014, and I just used Windows on it for about 4 years until late 2018. And then I went back to GNU Linux and I installed Debian. Let's talk about Debian. Debian I used in 2018 on my old laptop and in 2020 on this ThinkPad. Debian is a great distro for new users. It's very easy to use, easy to configure, and it's easy to update. It's been around forever. Since '93, Debian is one of the oldest Linux distributions. And it's also one of the most forked Linux distributions. I would say most Linux distros out there, out of all of them, are based on Debian and use the apt package manager. This time I didn't do the CDs. I had graduated to flash drives, installing stuff on flash drives. Oh, I was going to show you what my Arch rice might have looked like back then. This is not a real picture of my rice. That's just someone else's. But they're using the awesome window manager, and I think my rice might have looked like that. They might be using the Unicode glyphs for their icons, and I remember having to use like PNG images. PNGs I edited in GIMP for my taskbar icons, because I don't think there were Unicode glyphs or nerd fonts back then or anything like that. If there was that stuff back then, I didn't know how to use it. Here's another Arch rice. When I used Arch, my shit didn't look that good, but it kind of looked like that. I mean, that was the thing I was going for. I had 2 taskbars. They're running awesome too. I wanted to have the different colors, and I did that. And I customized the context menu and the shutdown reboot menu as well for awesome window manager. But yeah, I got kind of bored with Debian. I mean, it's not rolling release. You have to upgrade it. They only do these serious upgrades. They only do new releases of Debian once every 2 years or something. And so you get a lot of these packages, these old, outdated packages that are kind of in limbo, that, haven't been updated in 6 months or a year or something. Or sometimes Debian doesn't have, newer packages or newer software. People complain about Debian like that. People complain that, oh, these packages are outdated. Oh, it doesn't have the super bleeding edge, stuff like Arch Linux does. It doesn't really need bleeding edge stuff. Debian is all about stability. It's all about, I just want to use my Linux system. I don't want to fucking break it. I don't want to spend 6 days trying to fix things that broke. I just want to set it and forget it. That's what Debian is good for. And so that's why Debian was a good choice when I got back into Linux around 2018, when I had my developer job. I remember the first time I installed Debian, the default desktop environment was XFCE, so it would have looked something like this. See that applications launcher in the top left? I remember the little dock on the bottom, and I remember that wallpaper. I'm pretty sure it looked just like that on Debian 9 or 10, which is what I would have used. I don't think I used Debian 11, I just used 9 and 10. But yeah, after getting bored with, Xface or KDE Plasma, I would install my awesome window manager, because that's just, what I knew about. That's just what I remember from, when I was much younger. So I installed Awesome Window Manager again. I realized I didn't like that. I didn't want to have to keep up with that. And then I installed, DWM, BSPWM, Spectrum. I really got flashy with it. You can see some of my old Debian and Devuan rices on my GitLab, on my .files repository on my GitLab. You'll see a link to my GitLab at the end of this video. After using Debian for a while, I probably used Debian a year total, 2 different times, maybe a little more than a year. Then I tried out this distro Devuan. It's like Debian, but without systemd, and it has all of Debian's packages that have been made to work without systemd. All of these packages have been changed and modified to work, around the absence of systemd. And, I think it's great for someone who wants to use Debian, but they don't want that evil bullshit lurking in their system. Maybe they could use Devuan. When I use Devuan, I remember I like to use i3 and Herbstluft WM. I used BSP WM too. Yeah, Devuan, it wasn't hard or tricky or difficult or anything like that. It was basically just Debian. I think I had to, change a repository URL or something like that. I had to make one little change to the package manager, and then everything worked. Everything worked with apt, just like Debian does. These non-free software works on Devuan, Sublime Text, Steam, Spotify. That stuff works. And then I got my new laptop. Or no, before I got my new laptop, my new ThinkPad, I installed Void on my old laptop. Void, I made a video about Void about a week ago. It uses runit instead of systemd. It can compile any package in the Void repositories. And I used it on my old laptop for about a year before using it on my ThinkPad for now. It's been around 7 months. So probably a year and 7 months total I've used Void, compared to around a year and a half I was using Debian and Devuan. Yeah, when I first got my ThinkPad, I kept Windows 10 on it so I could play some games, and I could play Fallout 4, and then I installed Debian. Because I wanted to use Debian again, get back in the swing of things, and after getting bored with Debian, I came back to Void, my favorite Linux distribution. The second time I installed Debian, the default desktop environment was KDE Plasma instead of Xface. So the default Debian 10 from back then would have looked like that. Or pretty close to that. Well, anyway, I am not going to talk about any other distros because these 5 are really the only distros I've seriously used as my daily drivers by installing them on my actual hardware. Ubuntu, Arch, Debian, Devuan, and Void. My personal favorite Linux distro, Void Linux, is what I'm using right now. So that's what the point of this video was. I just kind of wanted to talk about, old Linux, how it worked back then. I wanted to talk about being a teenager and using old versions of Arch and Ubuntu. Yeah, Linux was a lot different back then. It was just harder. There were just less resources. There was less help. If you wanted to get stuff working, there was less documentation available to help you. There was a lot more learning involved, and sometimes stuff just didn't work and you'd be stuck and you wouldn't know what to do because there just wasn't as much available for Linux users back in the early 2010s. So, you new Linux users should be grateful. You have Steam and Proton and Wine and snaps and Flatpaks, app images, because none of that stuff existed for Linux before. Well, anyway, thanks for watching my video, guys. Peace out.